As the lion in our Tiergarten remembers the nenuphars of his Nile, shall Arius forget Arion or Boghus the Bergams of the Marmarazalis from Marmenier? It may be, thoughts were since full a naggin in 20 have sigil posted what in our breathing boast the besieged bedreamt him still and solely of those Liliths undeveiled which had undone him, gone for age, and knew not the watchful treasures at his wake, and theirs to stay. Pfui, pfui, cammer misses, zippy zoppy, Larsen lads, zishin. It may be, we most uns hasten selves te declare it, that he reclaimed, pre-saw, the fields of heat and yields of wheat where corn gold yisit, shamed and shone. It may be, we happen to upseek a bitty door our good township's currents want we newt, that with his deep-seeing insight had not wishing oft been but good time wasted. Within his patriarchal shamana, broad-stained bove city, 'twill be! He conscious of enemies, a King Billy Whitehorsed in a fingless mill, prayed, as he sat on anxious seat, Cunt ye neat gift me toe bout the pure soft eyeballs. During that 3.5 hours agony of silence, ex profundis malorum, and bred with unfeigned charity that is word wonder, an Anglais to the teeth who, nomad Nash of Girahash, would go any old where in the weeping world on his mottled belly, the rab, the creepon's need, for milk, music, or merry demisoses. Might, mercy to providential benevolences who hates prudency's astuteness, unfold into the first of a distinguished dynasty of his posteriors, black-faced Connemara's, not of the fold, but elder children of his household, his most besetting of ideas, passe his 12 predominant passions, being the formation, as in more favoured climes, where the meadow of honey is guest-friendly and the mountain of joy receives, of a truly criminal stratum, Ham's crib-crackling yigs, thereby at last eliminating from all classes and masses with directly derivative decasualization. Sigarius, sic, vindicat urbis terrorum, sicker! And so, to mark a bank tal she alter, the obedience of the citizens help the earth of the all. Now good, let us leave theories there and return to here's here. Now here, 'tis good again. The teak coffin, pugless panel fitted, feats to the east, was to turn in later, and pitly-patly near the porpoise, materially affecting the cause. And this, lever, is the thing how. Any number of conservative public bodies, through a number of select and other committees having power to add to their number, before voting themselves and himself, town, port, and garrison, by a fit and proper resolution, following a court's order of the ground-wet, once for all out of plotty existence, as a force-cut, so your mate skippy might to your cut-in runner on a new pack of clards, made him, while his body still persisted, their present of a protum grave in Muelta of the best low-knee pattern, then as much in demand among Mesonessans as the Isle of Man today among limnophobes. Whacked even! It was in a fairly fishy kettle carry, after the Fianna's foreman had taken his handful, enriched with ancient woods and dear duchy deeplands, mid which were an old knoll and a trout-beck, very vain of her ossuary, and a chatty Sally with any wilt or walt who would ungle her as Isaac did to the tickle of his rod and watch her waters of, her sillying waters of, and there now brown Peter a ripple. May their quilt gild lightly over his somnolulent form, who for you lies his last, by the wrath of bog, like the erst cursed hun in the bed of his true bleu Donahue. Best. This was to have been underground heaven, or Moe's paradise, which was probably also an inversion of a Phalafaros, intended to foster wheat crops and to ginger up tourist trade. Its architect, Père Lachasse, having been obcecated lest he should petrifect such an ever while the contractors Messrs. T. A. Burkett and L. O. Twalhals were made invulnerably venerable. First in the west are Mr. Builder, Castle Villainous, openly damned and blasted by means of a hydromine system, sawn and belting, exploded from a reinvented TNT bombing post up a hoy of 11 and 30 wing rests. Sursitor, to stern-board out of his aerial torpedo, Autumn Dynamon, contacted with the expectant minefield by tins of improved ammonia lashed to her shield-plated gunwale and fused into trip-up cables, slipping through tholes and playing down from the conning tower into the ground battery fuse boxes, all differing as clocks from keys since nobody appeared to have the same time of beard. Some saying by their orlog it was 6 to 9, more holding with Ryan Vogt it was 10 to 5. He afterwards, whenever his blather began to fail off him, and his rough bark was wholly husky, and, stoop by stoop, he neared it. Woodman spar! Carefully lined the ferro-concrete result with rot-proof bricks and mortar, fast to Faust, and retired beneath the heptarchy of his towerets, the Bokump. Byward, bull and lion, the white, the wardrobe, and bloodied, so encouraging. In steppen, als hats believed. Additional useful counsels public with hoofed off dealings which were well holden of ladicants to her out such as the Breeders' Union, the Guild of Merchants of the Staple, et you see to present unto him with funebral pomp. Over and above that, a stone slab with the usual Macpella address of valediction, a very fair-worded instance of false-meaning etymology. We have done ours, go health with you. Here, whippet, overgiven it. Skidoo! But to house and all aboard shoops! Show coffins, winding sheets, goodbye biershepes, cinerary urns, lialad blasses, snuff chests, poteen tubs, lacrimal vases, hood doses, reekwater beckers, break middles, zootzaks for eat lust, including up your healthing rookwurst and meatherware soft and fork and putsies, and for that matter, gavel also. Any kind of inhumationary bric-a-brac for the adornment of his Glasstone Honofrium would, met these train of conditions, naturally follow, halas, in the ordinary course, enabling the round-the-world or wanderlings white, did such as pass him, to live all safe at homely the pre-senile days of his life of opulence, ancient ere decrepitude, late lint's last lenience, till stuffering stage, wailing away the whole of the while, hypnost kilia ionion, leather-lulled between explosion and re-explosion, Donner wate, Hunder thunder! From gross cup to megapod, embalmed, of grand age, rich in death anticipated. But abide Zate's summon serving, rise after fall. Blue blitz bolted from there, knowing the hingeworms of the hallmarks of habitationlessness, buried burrowing in Gehennon, to proliferate through all his unterwealth, seam by seam, sheol sheol, and revisit our upper crust Sideria of Utilitarios, the divine one, the hoarder hidden propagating his pluter-popular progenium of pots and pans and pokers and puns from Biddenland to Bottenland, the spearway for the sporeway. The other spring offensive on the heights of Abraham may have come about all quite by accidents, Vaterunzer, for Bredeboda had at length persuaded him to have himself to be as subtoply buried as the murdered Sion in Finntown. Had not been 3 monads in his watery grave, what vigilantes and ridings then, and sputwine pledges with Ardapple Fritling, when putrefaction, dreyfust as ever, began to ramp, the boys are parching. A hood and winkle gave the signal, and a blessing paper freed the flood. Why did the patrician make him scarce with his gruntins? Because the droiven were musketing at the door. From both Celtiberian camps, granting at the onset for the sake of argument that men on the 2 sides of New South Ireland and Vetera Ullad, Bloomin and Pillfaces, during the ferment with the Pope or on the Pope, had, mores or lets, grant ideas, grunted. All conditions, poor cons and dives more, each, of course, on the purely defensive, since the Eternals were alwise on their side every time, were drawn towards their Bellona's black bottom, once Woolwhite's waltz. Oh hippo, how becrimed, becursed and bedumtoit! Some for want of proper feeding in youth, others already caught in the honourable act of slicing careers for family and carvers in conjunction, and, if emaciated no, the person garroted may have suggested to whomever he took the ham of, the plain being involved in darkness, lo circa waggery, nay, even the first old wugger of himself in the flesh, vigissimus incarnadined, when false-sighted by the if such he was bully on the hill, for there had circulated freely fairly among his opposition the feeling that in so hibernating Massa Iwaka, who, previous to that dim-detached life, had been known of Barmecide days, Cook said, between soups and savours, to get outside his own length of rainbow trout and terts at a turn as no man of woman born, nay could, like the great crested breb, devour his 70 tin of roach per life day, aye, and as many minnow a minute, the big mix, may Gibbet choke him, was, like the salmon of his ladder leap, all this time of totality secretly and by suckage feeding on his own misplaced fat. Ladies did not disdain those pagan iron times of the first city, called after the ugliest Danadon, when a frond was a friend in need to carry, as earwigs do their dead, their soil to the earth ball, where indeed we shall calm decline, our legacy unknown. Venuses were giggly temptatrix, Vulcans guffawnly eruptious, and the whole wives' world frock full of fickles. Fact, any human in yon you liked any noon or after would take her bare godkin out, or an even pair of him, Lugod, Lugodu, and prettily pray with him, or with him even, every he to her taste, long for luck, tepet and tip petter and take pettest of all. Tip! Wells she'd woo and wills she's win, but how the dear knowed where she'd marry. Arbor, bucket room, caravan, ditch, coach, carriage, wheelbarrow, duncart. Kate Strong, a widow. Tip tip! She pulls a lane picture for us, in a dreario dreama setting, glowing and very visual, of old Dumplin as she nosed it, a home-like cottage of elven stone with droppings of biddies, stinkant pushies, mogies doggies, rotten witcher-wubblers, festering robbages and beggars' bullets, if not worse, sending salmofarious germs and gleefully through the smithering panes. Widow Strong, then, as her weaker had turned him to the wall, tip tip tip, did most all the scavenging from good King Hamlaw's Gurdon den through her lean besom cleaned but sparingly, and her bare statement reads that, there being no macadamized side tracks on those old necropolitan nights in, barring a foot batter, Bryant's Causeway, bordered with speedwell, white clover and sorrel a wood nose, which left off, being beaten, where the plaintiff was struck. She left down as scavengers, who will be scavengers most, her filth dump near the Serpentine in Fornix Park, at her time called Finewell's Keepsaker, but later Tato Baptost, Pat's Purge. That Dangerfield circling butcher's wood where fireworker O'Flaherty engaged a nutter of castle mallards and for Archer Stone's Turk, all over which fossil footprints, boot marks, finger signs, elbow dints, breech bowls, A.S.O. were all successively traced of a most involving description. What subtler time-place of the wild than such wolf's belly castrament to will hide a labhar from Thursman's brandahands or a love letter, lustfully hers, that would be lust on ma, then where ructions ended, then here where race began, and by 4 hands of forethought the first babe of reconcilement is laid in its last cradle of home sweet home. Give over it, and no more of it, so pass the pick for child's sake. Oh, min! For here all highest sprack for Krishknians as for propaganda fidis, and his nuptial eagles sharped their beaks of prey, and every mortal man of us, poem by poem, falls back into this terrain. As it was, let it be, says he, and it is as though where Agni Ara flammed and Mithra monished and Shiva slew as Maya Mutras the obluvial waters of our noarchic memory withdrew, windingly goherksome, to some hasty-swasty timberman torch priest, Flemenfan, the word of the wind that lightened the fire that lay in the wood that Jove built, at his rude word. Posidonius of Fluctuary, lave that bloody stone as it is. What are you doing, your dirty minx, and his big tree block way up your path? Slip around, you, by the rare of the ministers, and you, take that barrel back where you got it, MacShanes, and go the way your old one went, Hatchetsbury Road, and gish, how they gushed away, the penny fares, a whole school for scamper, with their sashes flying shish behind them, all the little pearly petties. Ici la chapelle. Any lookins, please? Yes, the viability of vicinals, if invisible, is invincible, and we are not trespassing on his corns either. Look at all the plotch! Flubinium! If this was Hannibal's walk, it was Hercules' work, and 100,000 of the unemancipated slaved the way. The mausoleum lies behind us. Oh, adgigasta, multipopule pater! And there are milestones in their shade melius faltering along the trains track by Brom and Anton Hermes, per omnibus secular sigularum. Amen. But the past has made us this present of a red herd. So more butter O'Connell, though rainy hidden, your rhino hide, and if he's not a Romeo, you may scallop your hat. Whereupunder in the fen of Saint Viecle, halte! It was hard by the house there, plainly on this dissolute and a buchan cold spot, Rupstrick then, resurfaced that now is, that Luttrell sold if Lottrell bought, in the saddle of the Brennans, now in Malpass Place? Pass, versts and versts from true civilization, not where his dreams topped their trumps halt. Beneath there, benathar, but where Liveland Yuntide mirrored with the wild, subtly with flood, that the attackler, a Kropotkin, though under medium and between colours with truly native pluck, engaged the adversary who had more in his eye than was less to his leg, but whom for plunder's sake he mistook in the heavy rain to be Oglethorpe or some other Ginkus, Par apparently, to whom the head and heelless chickenesteg bore some Michelangelesque resemblance, making use of sacrilegious languages to the defect that he would challenge their hemispheres to exterminate them, but he would canonize the bitter's life out of him and lay him out contritely as smart as the bitter had his night prayers said. 3 patriarch noxters and a couplet of Hail Marys, to is sacre por un sacre, theme a barbe o home no res. At the same time, so as to plug well let the globby well goats out of him, catching holst of an oblong bar he had and with which he usually broke furnitures, he rose the stick at him. The border incident pre-repeated itself. The pair, whether they were Nipoluono engaging Wei Ling Da or de Razkias trying to reconnoitre the general Bokolef, man may not say, struggled apparently for some considerable time, the cradle rocking equally to one and oppositely from the other on its law of capture and recapture. Under the all-in rules around the book safe, fighting like Purple Top and Tipperary Swede, sacramented Servius of the divine zeal. And in the course of their tussle the tollerman, who had opened his bully bolt to beg, said to the miner who was carrying the worm, a handy term for the portable distillery which consisted of 3 vats, 2 jars, and several bottles, though we purposely say nothing of the stiff, both parties having an interest in the spirits. Let me go, Pothin! I hardly knew you. Later on, after the solstitial pause for refreshment, the same man, or a different and younger him of the same ham, asked in the vermicular with a very ugly Chuchin grin, was 6 victorious 15 pigeon takey offer you? Tell he me, strong fella, by picky pocky tin to foul months behind the side? There were some further collide banter and severe tries to convert for the best part of an hour, and now a wooden affair in the shape of a webley. We at once recognize our old friend Ned of so many ill-temperate letters. Fell from the introsser who, as stuck as that cat to the mouse in that tube of that Christchurch organ, did the image of girl cloud pensive flout above them light young charm in ribbons and pigtail? Whereupon became friendly and, saying not his shirt to tear, to no wanted, joking and knob carries all aside laying, if his charge companion who struck still to the invention of his strong box with a tenacity corroborating their mutual tenatorial rights, happened to have the lutes change of a 10-pound crackler about him at the moment, addling that hap so, he would pay him back the 6 fix odd, do you see, out of that for what was taken on the man of samples last Juni or July. Do you follow me, Captain? To this the other, Billy with the bull, who had mummed and mulled up to that, for he was hesitancy carried to excelsicism, rather amusedly replied, Would you be grossly surprised, Hill, to learn that, as it so happens, I honestly have not such a thing as the least chance of a 10-pound crackler anywhere about me at the present moment, but I believe I can see my way, as you suggest, it being Yuletide or Jodenfest, and as it's mad nuts, son, for you when it's hatters, hares, mon, for me, to advance you something like 4 and 7 pence between hopping and trapping, which you might just as well have, by Bacchus, to buy JJ and S with. There was a minute's silence before memory's fires rekindling, and then, Heart alive! Which at very first wind of gay and Whiskwig's Wick's ears pricked up, the starving gunman, strike him pink, became strangely calm and forthright swire by all his lards personal that the thorn tree of Shul might ramify up his shiofun to the looks pointless, but he would go good to him sometime, marks my word for't, for a chip off the old flint, in the Nictian glossary which purveys a prioric roots for a posteriorius tongues, that is nat language at any sense of the world, and one might as fairly go and kiss his sprogs as fail to certify whether the war trophy alluded at some lives earlier was that something like a jug to what? A cocktable. And remarking in languid oily, Seemingly much more highly pleased than tongue could at this opening of a lifetime and the foretaste of the Dunbank pearl mothers and the boy to wash down which he would feed to himself at the rude cow at Tallant, and then into the good woman at Ringsend, and after her in at Conway's Inn at Blackrock, and, first of all, cursed be all, where appetite would keenest be, at funeral fair or fun fain real, Adam and Eve's in Quantity Street by the grace of Gamey Queen Telte, her will and testament. You stunning little Southdowner, I'd know you anywhere, Declaney. Let me truthfully tell you in or out of the extinction of life, and who the hell else be your blanched patch on the bony part. Gullball I've struck this daylit dilate night of nights, by golly. My hat, you have some bully German grit, Sundowner. He spud in his Faust. Excellent. He toped the raw best. Pardon? He poked his pick, a tip is a tap, and he took his friend's leave. And, with French hen or the portly faunium of hastes and leisures, about to continue that, the queer mixture exchanged the packs and embrace or pog who pooksy as practised between brothers of the same breast. Hallelujah, Killaleluja, Allenalaw, and, having ratified before the god of the day their Torgan truce, which belittlers have schmorkult, the cheating to Cognac, turning his fez menial straight in the direction of Moscus, he first got rid of a few Mitzmillers and Hurushals, and levanted off with tubular turbulence at a bull's run over the Aspak Bridge, spitting his teeths on Ruths, with the 7 and 4 in Dangle, and their humoral hurlbat or other uncertain weapon of lignum vitae, but so evermore ruminascent of a toboggan poop, picked up to keep some crow-plucking appointment with some rival Rialtos anywheres between Parrot and the Little Horn, while this poor Delany, who they left along with the Confederate fender behind, and who, albeit balls bluffed, bore up wonderfully wonder, all of it with a whole number of plum-sized contusions, plus alasala bruised kokicks, all over him, reported the occurrence in the best way he could, to the flabbergaze of the whole lab, giving the Paddy Banners the military salute as for his excellencies the Odafi, in justifiable hope that, in the Nobilo-Roman review of the hugely satisfactory conclusion of their negotiations and the juggle-monkeyish agreement Dean derivative, some lotion or fomentation of poppy heads would be generously exhibited to the parts, at the nearest watch-house in Vicar Lane, the white ground of his face all covered with diagonally red-crossed non-fatal mammalian blood as proof positive of the seriousness of his character, and that he was bleeding in self-defiance. Staunch it! From the nostrils, lips, pavilion, and palate, while some of his hitter's hairs had been pulled off his nuts head by Colt, though otherwise his all-round health appeared to be middling along, as it proved most fortunate that not one of the 206 bones and 501 muscles in his corso was a whit the worse for her whacking. Her whoop? Now then, leaving clashing ash, brawn and muscle and brass made to oast, earthenborn and rock crystal to wreck isinglass, but worming along gradually for our savings back towards mother waters so many miles from bank and Dublin stone, Olympiading even till the 11th dynasty to reach that thuddy sickened Hamlaw, and to the question of bonies unlawfully obtaining a pierced paraflum and claptrap fireguard their crops out the still more salient point of the politest leanings and town pursuits of our forebear, El Dom di Donnelly, may his ship thicket stick in the bottle of the river, and all his cruisers stock locked in the burl of the seas, who, when within the black of your toenail, sir, of being mistakenly ambushed by one of the Odavedas, and as close as made no matter, ma'am, to being killed offhand when the Huguenot heckler with the Peter the Painter wanted to hold him, was consistently practicing the first of the primary and imprescriptible liberties of the Pacific subject by circulating, "Be British, boys to your bellybone and chuck a chum a chance," alongst one of our unprohibited cemetery thoroughfares, open to buggy and bike, to walk, Wellington Park Road, with the curb or Quaker's quack nostrum under his oxter and his alpenstock in his red hand, a highly commendable exercise, or, number 2 of our acta legitima plebea, on the brink, beware to bulk a man at his will, of taking place upon a public seat, to what, bear by butts, most easterly, but all goes west, of Blackpool bridges, as a public protest and nature-like vice, without intent to annoy either, being praised good thankfully for the wrath-bereaved ring-dove and the fear-stung boa constrictor, and all the more right jolly well pleased, which he was, at having other people's weather. But to return to the Atlantic and Phoenicia proper, as if that were not to be enough for anyone, but little headway, if any, was made in solving the was-not-to-be crime conundrum, when a child of Mam, Vesti King, of a family long and honourably associated with the tar and feather industries, who gave an address in Old Promanche Mayo of the Saxons in the heart of a foul-famed Pothian district, was subsequently held up at the Old Bailey on the Calends of Mars, under an incompatibly framed indictment of both the counts, from each equinoxious points of view, the one fellow's fetch being the other fellow's person. That is to say, flying cushiots out of his overalls and making faces immodest his forces on the field. Oh yeah! When the prisoner, soaked in methylated, appeared in dry dock, a patently Ambrosial realized, like Cursis corduroy caricature, wearing, besides stains, rents, and patches, his fight shirt, straw braces, sou'wester, and a policeman's corkscrew trousers, all out of the true, as he had purposely torn up all his simchimanx bespokes in the mamertine, deposing for his execution with all the floors of sparse in the Royal Irish vocabulary how the whole padraig Martin, tripizatus sweet, and all the sulphate of coppers had fallen off him quite unaccountably like the crystallizations of alum uneven, while he was trying for to stick fire to himself. In fact, he was dripping as he found upon stripping for a pipkin of malt as he feared the cold rain. It was attempted by the Crown, P.C. Rabort, to show that King Elois Crowbar, once known as Maleki, impersonating a climbing boy, rubbed some pixes of any alluvial Patesmore o'er his face, plucks and poses, with a clane turf as the best means of disguising himself, and was to the Middlewhite Fair in Mudford of a Thursday, feists of peeler and pole, under the ill-assumed names of Tyking Fest and Rabwork, picked by him and Anthony out of a telephone book, allegedly with a pedigree pig, unlicensed, and a hyacinth. They were on that sea by the plain of 999 years, and they never cried crack or ceased from regular paddle-wicking till they landed their true and a trifling selves, amadst camel and ass, greybeard and suckling, priest and pauper, mater matron and Mary Meg, into the middle of the mudstorm. The gathering, convened by the Irish agricultural and prepostoral organizations to help the Irish muck to look his brother Dane in the face, and attended thanks to Larry by large numbers of Christies and Jews totems, to spite of the deluge, was distinctly of a scattery kind when the Ballybricken he could get no good of, after cock of the walking through a few fancy-fought mains ate some of the doorweg, the pikey later selling the gentleman ratepayer because she, Francie's sister, that is to say, ate a whole side of his, the animal's, sty, on a struggle street, qui sta troya, in order to pay off, hiss or lick, 6 doubloons 15 arrears of his, the villain's not the rumbler's rent. Remarkable evidence was given, anon, by an eye, ear, nose, and throat witness, whom Wesleyan chapel-goers suspected of being a plain-clothes priest, W.P., situate at Null, Medical Square, who, upon letting down his rice and pea-screen cover-disc and having been sullenly cautioned against yawning while being grilled, smiled. He had had a one-bumper at parting from Mrs. Mulroe in the morning, and stated to his solicitor under his most accents, "Gobless," that he slept with a bona fides, and that he would be there to remember the filth of November, Hattenaring, rowdy, which, with the jubilees of Juno and the dates of old Langxiety, was going, please the rainmaker, to decims within the ephemerides of profane history, all one with Tournay, yes to slay and Tamara, and one thing which would particularly strike a person of such sorely tried observational powers as Sam, him, and Moffat, though there's not to reason why. The striking thing about it was that he was petrified to see, hear, taste, and smell, as his time of night, how Hyacinth O'Donnell, B.A., described in the calendar as a mixer and word painter, with part of a civipassum, geltact for dung folk, on the fair green at the hour of 24 o'clock sought the bully Cassidy of the Friedhofer to sack, sock, stab, and slaughter single-handed another 2 of the old kings, Gush MacGael and Roaring O'Crian, Jr., both changelings, unlocalized, of no address and in non-communicables, between him and whom, ever since wallops before the Maze of Lewis, bad blood existed on the ground of the boar's trespass on the bull, or because he first parted his polar beaver hair in 2 ways, or because there were creep-foxed ant grasshopers over a nippy in a noveletta, or because they could not say meese, moot, and daft, meather. The litigants, he said, local congsmen and Donalds, kings of the Arans and the Dalkies, kings of Mud and Tory, even the god king of Killerglen, were egged on by their supporters in the shape of better women with bowstrung hair of Carotha genuine ruddiness, waving crimson petties and screaming from Izot's tower top. There were cries from the thicksets in court and from the MacDublins on the Bohernabreen of, "Mind the bank from Banagher Mick, sir! Produce O'Donnell! Aye! Exhibit his relics! Bill! Use the tongue more! Give lip less!" But it oozed out in Dead Man's dark scenery court through cross-examination of the case-hardened testes that when and where that knife of knives the three-parted ambush was laid, roughly spouting around half hours twixt dusk and dawn by Waterhose's Middle Europeic time near Stop and Think, High Chief Evervirens and only Abvaltree in Auld the land. There was not as much light from the widowed moon as would dim a child's altar. The mixer, accordingly, was bluntly broached, and in the best basil to boot, as to whether he was one of those lucky cocks for whom the audible, visible, noticeable, edible world existed. That he was only too cognitively, conatively, cogitabundantly sure of it because, living, loving, breathing and sleeping morpho-molosopho pancreatus, as he most significantly did, whenever he thought, he heard, he saw, he felt, he made a bell clipper, 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 clipper. Whether he was practically sure too of his lugs and choice names in this king and blossman business, that he was pediculously so. Certified, as cad could be. Be lying! Be the loney I will. It was Morbus o' somebody? A quite. Thursday's son? A satyr in weddings. And how did the green-eyed mister arrive at the B.A.? That it was like his pull. A cross-grained trapper with murty odd ogs, afflorated R's, inquelen nays, and a twithsherl's moof? He would be. Who could bid you at to a tenured full when astald? Belera jobra. Some magyar boar too? Iguanis. And with tumbleless legs, Redip nominated Helpingham, Erkenwine, Rotter, Egbert, Crummer, Olden, Maximus, Esmus, Saxon, Essa, Vercingetorix, Ethelwulf, Ruprecht, Yidwaller, Bentley, Osmond, Diesort, Yggdrasilman? Holy Saint Eiffel, the very phoenix! It was Chudley Magnol once more between the Depodatus and the Dome scene? The two child spies were praising him outside de Volug, but the renting of his rock was from the three wicked Vuncaverers forests bent down a hits? Art thou sure? You betty, Combilium comes! One of the Oxman's thingabossers? Vad? And had he been refreshed by the founts of bounty playing there? Is, pain, Erland in Long's goggling barrel? A loss of Lord Edward and a lack of Sir Philip a Surgeonet Shower-a-down could suck more gargling bubbles out of the 5 lamps and Porterin's praise. Wurgling and Mary's? As whose wouldn't, laving his leaf time in Blackpool. But, of course, he could call himself Tim, too, if he had time to. You bet he could in it home. When he pleased, when and place. A stoker temptated by eavesdripping against the driver who was a witness as well. Sacred Avatar, how the devil did they guess it? 2 drimiums in 1 dromium? Yes and no error. And both as like as a duel of lentils? Precisely. So he was pelted out of the coram populo, was he? Be the powers that be, he was. The prince in principle should not expose his person? Mochi vuel. Ruskiman camarade? Sooner Galwegian, he would say. Not unintoxicated, fair witness? Drunk as a bishop. Asked to whether she minded whether he smoked? Not if he barked into flames. Anent his ejaculations to his crosken lorn, cosa? It was corso in cursu on courser again. The gracious miss was we not doubt sensible how Yellowatty on the forks was altered? That she actually was, oh doubt me not. As to his religion, if any, it was the see you Sunday sort. Exactly what he meant by a pederast prig. But Jacobs, just a gent who prayed his Lent. And if middle-class Portavoros was a usual beast, by night as useful as a vomit to a shorn man. If he had rognarized the their courts marshals, did that days he had. Lindendally, Cook, or Skillies spell me gart without a gate? Hardly a drop. The grazing rights, Mrs. Magistra Martinetta, expired with the expiry of the goats, sire, if they were not mistaken. That he exactly could not tell the worshipfuls, but his mother and waiters had the recipes for the price of the coffin, and that he was there to tell them that herself was the velocipede that could tell them Kit-Kat. A mandarin tongue in a pondering jowl. Father Alder about the matters of pronunciation. distributary endings, and we recommends. Quare hircum? No answer. Unde gentium fe... No, Are you not dazzling on the edge of a volcano? Sir, I am dead. And how old of him? He was intended to study polo, which was meant in a shirt of 2 shifts macokamad or upfin, 3-headed ladder, that a head and thighs under a bush at the sunface would bait a serpent to a mill race through the heather. Armbird colour deftum ethnic fort perhaps? Sure and glumps handy juttlefessen as well. Hokey Jasons, then, in a pegasus? On a pontiff's order as tur as there's an itel on Itak, as a gullily bit to Joss, lily and tullily. But why this handkerchief and whence this second tone, son yet son? He had the kowtow in his boxer's flay of face. So this that solicitous, setting odds evens at defiance, took the lord from laborator? What displaced Tob, Dilk and Halley, not been greatly in love with the game? And changing the vendors, from the king's head to the republican's arms, as to the pugnacities evinced from flagpole to antepost during the effrays round Father Thyme's backside and the regents in the plant's own reigning, with the skiddy stars in the Morcan wind-up, how they appealed to him then? That it was wildfire's night on all the Betty Gallaghers, Mick Michael's swords shrieking shreks through the Wilkinses, and Neco Nicholas's toasting forks pricking prongs up the Tony bladders. Let there be fight? And there was. Fought. On the site of the angels, you said? Guinea's Gap, he said, between what they said and the Pussycatties. In the middle of the garth, then, that they mustn't touched it. The devoted couple was or were only 2 dissipated solistresses on the job of the unfortunate class on Saturn's mountain fort? That was about it, ja. And Camillus then said to Gemellus, I should know you? Perfectly. And Gemellus then said to Camillus, Yes, your brother? Absolutely. And if it was all about that, egregious sir? About that and the other. If he was not alluding to the hole in the wall? That he was when he was not alluding from the hole of the woman. Briefly, how much Beginnell finally struck him now? Like the crack that broke the bank in Multifarnham. Whether he fell in with what they meant? Cursed that he supposed he did. Those Thors, Thomerstom? The rudest rotter in Robuckdom. Sir Topical? And subhuman. If it was, in Yapanoise language, Ak Bad Klop? Ooh! Ah! Ogs and oars with Ryan O'Kelly to put it tertianly. We wrong? Shocking! Such as Turley pierced our realies that he might never that night? Treely and rurally. Bladiog Fauma Leckenberg Hora scored a strump of porn and any cocks up past it Patapa Tupper Stippak Potaloch. You have it all right. Merdrick un Oinquish. But a new complexion was put upon the matter when to the perplexedly uncondemnatory bench, whereupon Punic judgeship strove with penal law. The senior king of all, Peggerfesty, as soon as the outer layer of Stuckamuck had been removed at the request of a few live jurors, declared in a loud burst of poesy, through his Byrthonic interpreter on his oath, Muith pieth muith as fiera buera mur riosmus. Reas take notice be the relics of the bones of that story-bookle that was ate be Cleopatra, the sow, princess of parked porkers, afore God and all their honours and king's commons that, what he would swear to the tyranny of Dundalgan or any other tyranny, if live Thurkels followed him about sure that was no steel and that, nevertheless, what was deposited from that eyebald earbig nose-naving gut-throat, he did not fire a stone either before or after he was born down and up to that time. And incidentalizing that they might talk about Marcarthy, or they might walk to Ballastarty, or they might join the neighbour party and come on to Porterfeud, this the Sockdolager had the neck to endorse with the head bowed on him over his outturned nor'easter by protesting to his lip-readers with a just-been-cleaned barefacedness, a beam of moonlight's hope, in the same Trelawney what he would impart, please bench, to the Lluid Joseph and to the gentlemen and juries and the 4 of masterers who had been all those yarns yearning for that good one about why he left Dublin, that Amrita Baker Codling Doom, as an Irishman was as good as any canton natal. If he was to perish by the market stake before the dorming of the moon, he scould never ask to see sight or light of this world or the other world or of any either world, of Tyron Og, as true as he was there in that jackabox that minute, or wheeled or wind. No thanks to yous, the inexhaustible wasselhorn tot of Iskibosh, the health of the wealth of the Intnon abgod of the fire of the moving way of the hawks with his heroes in war horror, if ever in all his exchequered career he up or lava at chancery hand to take or throw the sign of a mortal stick or stone at man, Yolam or Salvation Army either before or after being baptized down to that most holy and every blessed hour. Here, upon the half-kneed castle-knockers attempting kithogishly to lilt his holy mess the pause and make the sign of the Roman Godhilic vex, Zerashi, Zverst! In his excitement the lado had broken extra-Castilian into which the whole audience perseguired and pursued him ola podrida. Outbroke much yellacters from owners in the hail, Ha! In which, under the mollification of Methaclin, the testifier reluctantly, but with ever so ladylike indecorum, joined. Ha! Ha! The hilarious hoot of Pegger's wind-up come justled as neatly with the tristed tone of the wet pinters as were they isque et ille equals of opposites, evolved by a one same power of nature or of spirit, iste, as the sole condition and means of its him and her manifestation and polarized for reunion by the symphysis of their antipathies. Distinctly different were their dua destinies. Whereas the maid is of the bar, a perilous trentine, a lunarized score. When the Aranthus murmured, Show 'em the post, fluttered and flattered around the willingly pressed, nominating him for the swiney prize, complimenting him, the captivating youth, on his having all his senses about him, stinking hyacinths through his curls. Oh, fin! Oh, Dieu! And bringing bosses to his cheeks, their masculine Irisher rose. His niece Claire! And legando round his nice new neck for him, and pizzicagnolic his woollywags, with their dindy-dandy sugar-de-candy mecre me posting flons courier to believe them of all his untiring young dames and sent treats in their times. Yemen. But it was not unobserved of those presents, their worships, how, of one among all, her deputized to defame him by the Lunar Sisters' Celibacy Club, a love-looking leap girl, all alonely, gentia gamma of the make-giddy culling reeks, he, wan and pale in his unmixed admiration, seemed blindly, mutely, tastelessly, tactlessly enamoured with her upon him in shining amminglement, the shame of his hiso shifting into the shimmering of her hers. Yutzi, he's her chap, and she'll tell Mimis when she gaes home. To the wild wish of her shishe melted most musically mid the dark deep of his sheshon. And whereas distracted, for was not just this in effect which had just caused that the effect of that which it had caused to occur? The four justicers laid their wigs together, Ontius, Monsius, Pontius, and Pilax, but could do no worse than promulgate their standing verdict of nolens bromens, whereon after King, having murdered all of the English he knew, picked out his pockets and left the tribunal scot-free, trailing his Tomy-Lomi's tunic in his hurry, therein proudly showing off the blink pitch to his britkits to prove himself, Ant Plasius, a rare gentile. To the Swiss bodyguards curial but court-like, Commodore Valley, O Harry, Ordre Generosi, the firewater Louver retorted with such a vine-smelling fortitude ages raw down hans tannu hide as would turn the Latin stomach even of a Thomas Equinus. We were prepared for the chap's clap-cap, the accent, but took us as by surprise, and now we're gashing it like gush-gash from a burner. So that all the 2 from 30 advocatasses within echo, pulling up their briefs at the crig, Shun the pun, man! Safely and soundly succoured that Finnegan parish poser. How dare he? Impromptu rotaway hams. Much to his thanks, gratia sagum, to all the wrong done actresses. Bis drink battles dingy dwellings where, for like your true Venice on Esau, he was dove timid as the deers at bottom. He shat in, zoo, like the muddy goldbind who he was, dun. The chastity's bells conclaiming, You and your gift of your gaft of your garbage about our fiver! And gang gridando, Hon, Berg, Null, Puter, Scam, Shams, Shames! And so it all ended. Artha, Kama, Dharma, Moksha. Ask Kavya for the key. And so everybody heard their plaint and all listened to their applause. The letter! And the soother the better, of eyebrow penciled by lip stipple penned, borrowing a word and begging the question and stealing tender and slipping like soap. From dark Rosa Lane a sigh and a weep, from Lesbia Lucia the beam in her eye, From lone Cooganbarry his arrow of song, from Sean Kelly's anagram a blush at the name, from I am the Sullivan, that trumpeting tramp, from Suffering Dufferin the sit of her style, from Kathleen May Vernon her maybe fair efforts, from Phil the Pot Curran his Scotch love Macraither, from him Opus 2 Phil Adolphus the weary, the leery, from Samuel Laver or Damuel Lover, that jolly old Molly bit or that bored saunter by, from Tim Finn against weak tribes' loss of strength to his saw wheel, from the wedding on the green, a Garley's, the greatness of Joy Boys, from Pat Mullen, Tom Mallon, Dan Meldon, Don Malden, a slick stick picnic made in Moat by Muldrons. The solid man saved by his sillied woman. Crack-a-jolking away like a hearse on fire. The elm that whimpers at the top told the stone that moans when stricken. Wind broke it, wave bore it, reed wrote of it, scythe ran with it. Hand tore it and wild went war. Hin trived it and plight pledged peace. It was folded with cunning, sealed with crime, uptied by a harlot, undone by a child. It was life, but was it fair? It was free, but was it art? The old hunks on the hill read it to perlection. It made Ma make merry and Sissy so shy, and rub some shine off Shim and put some shame into Sean. Yet Una and Ita spill famine with drought, and Agrippa, the propastard, spells tribulations in his strain. Fructe, timid denatis, in a Milo melamon, fry is fra and swee is two when swoo is free, and a mala woe is we. A pair of syncopanties with amygdalin eyes, one old obster lumpy pumpkin and 3 meddlers on their slides. And that was how Fram Sin from Son, a city arose, fin fun fun, a sitting arrows. Now tell me then. What was it? So there you are now, there they were, when all was over again, the 4 with them, sitting around up in their judges' chambers, in the monument room of their Marshalsea, under the auspices of Lally, around their old traditional tables of the law like so many Solons to talk it over the row the same again. Well and truly dry, suffering law the dring, according to King's Evelyn's. So help her goat and kiss the book. Festives and Hyajinks and Gintion and her Betty Rossi, Betty Doty, and not to forget now Aduna O'Darnell. The 4 of them, and thank court now there were no more of them. So pass the push for port's sake, be it soon. Aho! And do you remember Singabob, the bad father, the great how-do-you-call-him, and his old nickname, Dirty Daddy Pantaloons, in his monopoliums behind the War of the 2 Roses, with Michael Victory, the Sheeman's priester, before he caught his paper dispensation from the Poke, Old Minas and Minister York? Do I mind? I mind the gush of the mon like Ballybuck manure works on a trade Wednesday, and the O'Moily Graces and the O'Brien Rossies chaffing him bluckface and playing him pranks. How do you do, Northminster? Get into my way. Dear me for sailor she, gone over the bays, when gin a body made a body. Yera, why would he heed that old gasometer with his whooping coppin and his dying boozy cough and all the birds of the south side after her? Minxie Cunningham, their dear divorcee darling, Jimmy's and Johnny's to be her Joe? Hold hard. There's 3 other corners to our Isles Cork float. Sure, 'tis well I can telesmell him, H2CE3, that would take a township's breath away. Gob, and I knows him too well as I do myself, heaving up the K wall by the 32 to 11 with his lime-looking horse-bags full of sesame seed, the white-side kaffir, and his same as effluvium and his scent-painted voice, puffing out his thundering big brown cabbage. Pa! Thought I'm glad a goal for his posting fune. Goboro, says he, Lancashire. Go bugger ye, says I. Oh, breezes! I sniffed that lad long before anyone. It was when I was in my farfather out of the west, and she and myself, the red-headed girl, first nighting down Sycamore Lane. Fine field play we had of it, mid the kissabets frisking in the cool kirkle dusk of the lushiness. My perfume of the pampas, says she, meaning me, putting out her netherlights, and I'd sooner one precious sip at your pure Mountain Dew than enrich my acquaintance with that big brewer's belch. And so they went on, the 4 bottlemen, the analysts, Ungum and Nungum and Lungum again, their Anschluss about her whose before and his whereafters, and how she was lost away in the fern, and how he was founded deep on deep in an ear, and the rustlings and the twitterings and the raspings and the snappings and the sighings and the paintings and the ucucoings and the hist, the spring apartings and the hast, the bye-bye-scuttlings, and all the scandal-monkers and the pure-craigs that used to be up. That time living and lying and rating and riding round Nunsbelly Square, and all the buds in the bush, and the laughing jackass. Harrick! 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 The rose is white in the derrick, and Sunfella's nose has got rhinoceros from haunting the rose in the parrock. So all rogues leaned to rhyme, and contra-drinking themselves about Lily Trilly, Lopon Healy, and Mrs. Niall of the Nine Corsages, and the old Marcus their besterfar, and arrah, sure there was never a Marcus at all among the Manleys, and dear Sir Armory, queer Sir Rumory, and the old house by the Chirphaley Zone, and all the goings on so very wrong long before when they were going on retreat, in the old Gameldags, the four of them, in Milton's Park under lovely Father Whisperer, and making her love with his stuff in the languish of flowers, and feeling to find what she mushy, and wasn't that very both of them, the saucy sisters, a Drahrin O'Macry, and Peep, meeting waters most improper, Pipette, bow round the garden, trickle, 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 triss, please, me man, may I go flirting? Farmers gone with a groom, and how they used her, mused her, licked her, and cuddled. I differ with ye. Are you sure of yourself now? You're a liar. Excuse me. I will not, and you're another. And Lully holding their breach of the peace for them. Poor Lully, to give and to take, and to forego the past, and all will be forgotten. Aho! It was too bad to be falling out about her kindness, pet, and the shape of Oring's time. Well, all right, Lely, and shake a hand, and shake us more, for Craig's sake. Be it suck. Well, even should not the framing up of such figments in the evidential order bring the true truth to light as fortuitously as a dim seer's setting of a star chart might, heaven helping it, uncover the nakedness of an unknown body in the fields of blue, or as forhearingly as the sib speeches of all mankind have foliated, earth seizing them, from the root of some funner's stotter, all the soundest sense to be found immense our special mentalists now holds, secerus judicat urbis terrarum, that by such playing possum our hagius curious ancestor bestly saved his brush with his posterity, you, charming comparsoners, us, heirs of his talesy. Gundogs of all breeds were beagling with renounced Urbian Derbic bugles, hot to run him, given law, on a cint breast high, keen for the worry. View! From his holt outratted across the Juletide's genial courselands of Humphreys Chase from Millinahob and Peacockstown, then bearing right upon Tankardstown, the outlier, a white Llewellyn which Mr. Lowenstill Fitz Ursus Bassett Beaters had first misbadgered for a brune of some swart, led Bears the run, then through Raystown and Horlockstown, and, looping the loop, to Tankardstown again. Ere canny har for Dublin through Chaverstown they raced him, through Lowlandstown and Notestown to want him by the bullies. But from the good turn when last he was lost, check, upon ye hill of rut in full winter coat with ticker pads, punting for his rooming house his old Nordist and his roll to proil Hessians a deaf Fuchser's vulpinism hid him close in covert, miraculously raven-fed and buoyed up, and rumour, reticule, onosum and abomasum, upon, may Albraham have his mead, the cream-clotted sherriness of cinnamon syllabub, mickle raved, nickel saved, hence hounds hid home. Preservative perseverance and the re-education of his intestines was the rebuttal by Wilkie's sort of get the big bulge on the whole bunch of spassokers, dieting against glues and gravies in that sometime pre-street protown. Vainly violence, virulence, and vituperation sought well-nigh utterly to attax and abridge, to derail and depontify, to enrate and inroad, to ungood and unwhom the great shipping mogul and underlinen overlord. But the spoil of hesitance, the spell of hesitancy. His attack is it ashy, tittery taw tattery tail, hesitance hump on a damply, hey, a wincy winky. Assemblyman murmured, Renard is slow. One feared for his days. Did there yawn? 'Twas his stomach. Eruct? The labour. A gush? From his visuals. Pung? Deliver him, or Lord. He had laid violent hands on himself. It was brought in Fouker's newsletter, lain down, all in, fagged out, with equally melancholy death. For the Triduum of Saturnalia his goat servant had paraded his willing sons in the forum, while the Jinny infanted the last to be greeted raucously, the yard stated, with hawks and aphis and measured with missiles too, from 100 of manhood and a whimmering of waves. Big went the bang, then wild wide was quiet. A report. Silence. Last Fama put it under ether. The nose or the lull had driven him blim, blim, stumblim. Sparks flew. He had fled again. Open Shachema! This country of exile, slowed off, siddle-shummed via the subterranean shored with bedboards, stowed away and anchored in a Dutch bottom tank, the Arsa, hauled SS Finlandia, and was even now occupying, under an Islamitic Nuham in his 7th generation, a physical body Cornelius McGrath's Baldumed character, Common Kanbung, in Asia Minor, where as Turk of the theatre, first house off Flatty, the king 11 sharps. He had bepiastered the Buchten Joyces from the opulence of his omnibox, while as Arab at the street door he bepastered the Bombishaws for the alms of a Paris pence. Wires hummed. Peacefully general astonishment, assisted by regretitude, had put a term till his existence. He saw the family Sagarth, resigned, put off his remainders, was recalled and scrape-heaped by the maker. Chirpings crossed. An infamous private ailment, vulgario venero, had claimed Indright, closed his vicious circle. Snap! Jams jarred. He had walked toward the middle of an ornamental lily pond when inebriated up to the point where braced shirts meet knickerbockers, as wangfish daring the buoyant waters, when Rodman's first-aiding hands had rescued from very possibly several feel of dimmerfish water. Mush spread. On Umbrella Street, where he did drinks from a pumps a kind workman, Mr. Whitlock gave him a piece of wood. What words of power were made fast between them, ik names and oknoms, eknomina? That, oh that, did Hansard tell us, with Gargan's dub's ear wag in every pub of all the city. Batty believes a baton, while Hogan hears a hod, yet here prefers a pencil sharpener, and cup and bull go cup and ball. And the Cassidy, Craddock, Rum, and rim around, a wish ne'er a waj is still immer and immor a wagering over it, a cradle with a car in it, or a casket with a kick behind. Totis, testis, quotis, questis. The war is in words, and the wood is the world. Maple me, willow we, hickory he, and you yourselves. How for whom chirrupeth ever reach bird? From Guldon glory to glowworm glean. We were loquax, did we not tacit turn? Elsewhere there here no concern of the Guinnesses, but only the ruining of the rain has heard. Estat porteral! Cracklings cricked, a human pest cycling. Pissed! And recycling. Passed! About the sledgy streets. Here he was. Pushed! Again! Morse nuisance noised. He was loose at large and, oh baby, might be anywhere when a disguised ex-nun, of huge stand-build and masculine manners in her fairly fat 40s, corpulenta gagasta, attracted attention by arbitrary conduct with a omnibus. Aerials buzzed to coastal listeners of an Urtax Bror collector's budget. Fullybigs, sporran, tie, tuft, tabard, and bloody anti-chill cloak, its tailors. Barnfathers. Tab reading VPH found nigh Skull Brothers whole, and divers shivered to think what kind of beast, wolves, cropuses, or fourpenny friars had devoured him. CW cast wide. Vidvin's Lake, Jonas Vertgleam, Backer looked. On his pink serge postern, the boys had it. At Whit Weekend had been nailed an inked-up name and title, inscribed in the national cursives, accelerated, regressive, filiform, turreted, and envenomoloped in bigotry. Move up, Mumpty! Make room for Rumpty! By order, Nicokellas plug. And this go, no Pentecostal jest about it, how gregarious his race soever, or skilful, learned-wise, cunning, knowledgeable, clear, profound, his saying, fortitudo fraught, or prudentia proven. Were he chief, count, general, field marshal, prince, king, or Miles the Slasher in his person, with a Mulia Mordher mansion in the Breffnian Empire and a place of inauguration on the hill of Tullymungan, there had been real murder, of the Re Hilak Roigal Raxacraxian variety. The Macmahon chaps, it was, that had done him in. On the Fid of Verdure, the rampart combatants had left him lying with his dexter handcup resurrected in a peridi powmy bloody proper. Indeed, not a few thick and thin well-wishers, mostly of the Clontarf-minded class. Colonel John Ball O'Rourke, for examples, even ventured so far as to loan or beg copies of D. Blancy's Trilingual Tri-Weekly, Scatterbrains' Afternoon Post, so as to make certain sure one time and be satisfied of their quasi-contribusodalitarians having become genuinely quite beatly dead, whether by land, whither by water. Transocean attaclamored him. The latter! The latter! Shall their hope then be silent, or Macfarlane lack of lamentation? He lay under leagues of it in deep Bartholomew's deep. Achtung! Posor! Attention! Bikeroid besides smoky young pigeskolis. Try pais denaris eventur med lochlener bathak I Fionis gehaven. Banalana bangs ballyhooly out of her buttery of a bullavog. But, their bright little contemporaries notwithstanding, on the morrowing morn of the suicidal murder of the unrescued expatriate, as like as a snake comes sladuant down that oak tree unto the Duke of Beavers. You may have seen some liquid amber exude exotic from a balsam poplar at parting a loch's limestone. Rode and cried Abby's Magnifica, not noble fir. 9:15, imploring his recipiency, saw the infallible spike of smokes just stiff punctual from the seventh gable of our Quintus Sintimachus's Poiferoid butter tower, and then thirsty P.M. with oaths upon his lastingness. In caecus harespecies, annos longos patimar, the lamps of maintenance. Beacons far afield inner half the Zogorat, all brevet named, the wasting wefirm, the tawny of his mane, the swinglow swaying blue paw, the outstanding man, the lolly-like lady, being litten for the long. O land, how long! Life's night, with suffusion of fine glass transom and lead-light panes. Wheretofore let it hardly by any being thinking be said either or thought that the prisoner of that sacred edifice, were he an Ivor the Boneless or an Olaf the Hyde, was at his best a one-stone parable, a rude breathing on the void of to be, a venter hearing his own book speech in backwards, or, more strictly, but Tristern initials, the clue key to a world room beyond the room world, for scarce one, or pathetically few of his dodecanal salmon livers cared seriously or for long to doubt with Kurt Yuld van Dijke, the gravitational pull perceived by certain fixed residents and the capture of uncertain comets chance-drifting through our system suggesting an authenticitatum of his aliquotudinis, the canonicity of his existence as a tesseract. Be still, O quick, speak him dumb, hush ye fronds of Olma. Dispersal women wandered. Was she fast? Do tell us all about, as we want to hear all about. So tell us all about her. The why or whether she looked a laddie like Ossies, and whether he had his whim dopped like Themses shot. Notes and queries, tip bids and answers, the laugh and the shout, the ards and downs. Now listed to one anither, and list them down and smoothen out your leaves of rose. The war is o'er. Whim. Was it Unity Moore, or Estella Swift, or Verena Fay, or Quarta Quaidum? Thomas, mark for your unskul. Paggies, hold up med your leg. Who, for second time of asking, was then the scourge of the parts about Fulcrich Lucalizod, it was wont to be asked, as, in ages behind of the Homo Capite Erectus, what price Peabody's money, or, to put it bluntly, whence is the Harrington's white cravat, as, in epochs more Cenozoic? Who struck Buckley, though nowadays, as then times, every school filly of 70 moons or more, who knows her etymologies in every Colleen ball a roof, and every red flammel-waving war-wife and widow-piece upon Dublin wall forever knows, as yayas is yayas, how it was Buckley's self, we need no blooding paper to tell it neither, who struck and the Russian generals, da, instead of Buckley, who was caddishly struck by him when be herselves. What full-pride Paul poison in the spy of 3 castles, or which hate-filled smiley cellar? And that such a vitriol of venom, that Queen's head of Francisson, a quiet stinking plaster zeal could cover, pre-posted or post-paid. The lounge lizards of the pump-room had their 9 days' jeer, and pratchkets at their platch pails too, and Hullen pulled them beside. Spaz, zane zonis, when, still believing in her own glass, when Azaries were twinklings, that the upper reaches of her mouthless face and her impermanent waves were the better half of her, one nearer him, dearer than all, first warming creature of his early morn, bondwoman of the man of the house, and murmur of all the Macavics, she who had given his eye for her bed and a tooth for a child till 1 and 110 and 100 again. O me and O ye, cadet and prim, the hungry and angrin. And if she is older now than her teeth, she has hair that is younger than thine, my dear. She who shuttered him after his fall, and waked him without sparing, and gave him keen, and made him able, and held Adizalas to each arch of his nose, she who will not rast her from her running to seek him till, with the help of the TMEC, some such time that she shall have been after hiding the crumbins of his enormousness in the are you looking for pearl far sea, Uria, stood forth, burns the Gorgony old Dan world, in Gogur's name, for Gagar's sake, dragging the countryside in her train, Binnakin here and Fonakin there, with her Lois Queen's brogues and her colander buzzle and her little bolero boa and all the 2x20 curly cornies for her headdress, specs on her eye and spuds on her elves and circus fix riding her Parisians cockneys, avant her straddle from equerry Egan, when tink in the church close clinked steplo a jazzima Sunday, sola, with pawns, prelates and polkas piloting in her piece bag, for handyman the chop, esquero, bisque to cross the slander's head. Wary weenie white, plead for more and more. Notre Dame de la Ville, mercy of thy Balmhurtsy heat, O Groudnix beyond her te, word of the druggist, bulk him no bulkis, and let him rest, thou wayfarer, and take no grave spoil from him. Neither mar his mound, the bane of Tut is on it. Where? But there's a little lady waiting, and her name is A.L.P., and you'll agree, she must be she, for her holden are heaps hanging down her back. He spent his strength amok harum-scarums, Poppy Narancy, Gialia, Clora, Marinka, Annelin, Parme. And ilka those dames had her rainbow humours, yet for Wilco her whims but a coined a cure. Tiff today, kissy today, and age-long pine tomorrow. Then who but crippled with children would speak up for dropping with sweat? Sold him her lease of 990, tresses undresses so dainty. Gu, the great gudgeon, gulped it all. Who was the C.O.D.? Bum! At Island Bridge she met her tide. At a bum, bum. The Finn had a flux and his Ebba a ride. At a bum, bum. We're all up to the years in hues and cribes. That's what she's done for we. Whoa! Nomad may roam with Naboth, but let Naaman laugh at Jordan. For we have taken our sheet upon her stones, where we have hanged our hearts in her trees, and we list, as she bibs us, by the waters of Babylon.